You're tramping quietly through the marshy soil. As the tendrils of shadow curl around you, here and there the sounds of scratching footsteps echo down the tunnels as small creatures move throughout the maze. As you hold the spluttering torch overhead, you press a cloth to your face and lean in to read the inscription on the wall. After all, you don't want to breathe the air down here freely. Welcome to the tunnels and chambers of the Undercity. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills for this final episode in our latest series, The Red Quills Guide to Fantasy Lands. We've spent the last 6 weeks exploring some of the iconic kinds of settings that you can touch on in your fantasy games and stories, from the peaceful lands of the halflings to the strange wilds of the Fae, from sunken ruins to the Underdark. And now, fresh from our sojourn to the astral plane, we land in the rather smelly chambers of the Undercity. Since our very popular Mega Dungeons video, we've had a lot of interest in doing a follow-up on that same topic, looking especially at some of the different specifics of the process, the multi-level methods, the isolinear style, the filling and the substance, and some questions about the fauna and flora. And that second video, which will be tentatively titled Mega Dungeons 2 Even More Mega, is coming, but I'm doing some of my own experimentation in this video on a different style of map. So, you can hold onto your horses until Mega Dungeons 2 Even More Mega comes out, but if you want some insights into the process and my own experiments, this video will help, and will delve more specifically into the setting of the Undercity, the warren of tunnels that can be found under large cities. Now, grab your quills and paper and hold onto that torch. We're heading down into the Undercity. We're going to start as we always do with a large blank sheet of A2 paper. We're going with a thickness of 180 GSM for these maps. I'll put the list of materials in the description below, as it's a good ratio of thickness to size. Using watercolors means that you'll need thicker paper to absorb the water properly. I'm using paint on this map to give an extra aesthetic appeal, but the main map part is almost entirely inked, so you don't need to. So, let's start with how to create your own Undercity map. First, you can begin by lightly sketching the main layout of our Undercity. Think about the overall structure. Will it be a maze-like labyrinth, a series of interconnected chambers, or a combination of both? Start with the major pathways and chambers. Use light pencil strokes so you can easily adjust as needed. As you draw, consider the flow of the Undercity. Where are the major entrances and exits? Are there any significant landmarks, such as a central market, a hidden temple, or a guarded treasure room? On this map, I've labelled several, both from the previous adventures that I've run, and from things that I'd like to do. Crypts, thieves' guilds, vampires' lairs, they all add to the metropolis beneath the metropolis. One of the unique aspects of Undercity maps is the verticality. These maps often have multiple levels stacked on top of each other. Now, I've used this isolinear style to show the layers, but you can simply do them one over the other, like in a building plan. I do something like that in my heist map video. Consider how these levels connect. Are there staircases, ladders, or hidden passages? How do the inhabitants move between levels? I've connected specific chambers to their counterparts on different levels, and each of them implies a different method of moving to and from the surface. The arena, for instance, extends all the way down, but that warren of chambers is its own issue, while you could use the drainage tunnels, which are considerably more difficult to maneuver through. Now let's add some environmental details. Think about what makes the Undercity unique. Is it damp and mouldy with water dripping from the ceiling? Are there ancient inscriptions on the walls, or glowing mushrooms providing light? Now, I've been sparing on written details like that on this map, but that's why I've added the watercolor. It's no accident that I've used brown paint and smudged it. Once you're satisfied with your pencil sketch, it's time to ink the map. Use a fine-tipped pen for the main outlines and a thicker pen for the borders and major pathways. Take your time with this step to ensure clean, precise lines. Inking can be a relaxing process, but it requires patience. Make sure that your hand is steady and take breaks if needed. After inking, you can erase any remaining pencil marks to keep your map looking neat. Now I've used the specific bubble-like style here for the tunnels and a stippling style for the city to imply the massive amount of detail without spending days on one piece of paper, but there are any number of styles that you can use. If you don't like this particular one for the tunnels, you can always check out the adventure map video for another style of tunnels. With the main elements in place, it's time for the final touches. Add any labels or annotations to help identify key areas. You can also include a legend or a key to explain any symbols or markings that you've used. I keep these naturalist maps very free of legends or symbols, and I try to pare down the number of labels to stop them from getting too complicated, although that's an issue that comes up regardless. But give yours some thought. Each of the maps in this series is a different style, with all that unites them being the sketches of flora and fauna in the borders. There are 6 individual map-making methods here, all of which are different from the standard top-down stylized fantasy map. So what are you trying to convey? How can you imply or add details by choosing the right style? Such choices can certainly help you to establish an aesthetic for the setting, quite apart from anything else. Now that you've begun to create your Undercity, let's explore it a little bit. All cities have some element that's buried underneath the surface. It could be for a variety of reasons. It may not be because their activities are criminal, but rather because they prefer the dark and the quiet to conduct their activities. And as I say it, I realize how suspicious that sounds, but still, perhaps the practical classes at the local magical academy go down there, or the beggars have their court, or the arena fighters have their training rings. The Undercity is a natural habitat for thieves and their guilds. These secretive organizations often control large portions of the underground network. They use it as a base for their operations. So consider where these thieves might gather. Are there hidden passageways or secret doors leading into their lairs? You can mark them on your map to add layers of intrigue for players or readers. Thieves guilds often have different areas, so remember that. One's for training, one's for stolen goods, one's for planning heists. Use unique symbols like daggers or locks to represent guild areas. Incorporate secret entrances, hidden tunnels. Maybe add some shaded areas to indicate their covert nature. And think about access to the surface, their proximity to valuable targets, the need for secrecy. Placing them near trade routes or wealthy districts can make for interesting plot points. But the Undercity isn't just home to thieves, it's also a refuge for society's outcasts, beggars, fighters seeking underground arenas, and black markets where anything can be bought or sold. And these areas can be bustling hubs of activity filled with makeshift homes, hidden taverns, and clandestine trade spots. Depicting these on your map can help bring the Undercity to life. Think about the flow of people and goods and how these elements interact within the confined spaces of the tunnels. You can use symbols like a coin or a stall to indicate market areas. Consider adding pathways that lead to and from these spots that show the flow of illegal trade. You can depict an arena with a circular or an oval shape, and you can include stands or seated areas, adding symbols for weapons or trophies to highlight its purpose. But no Undercity is complete without its share of strange and dangerous creatures, from giant rats to monstrous aberrations. These beings can make exploring the Undercity a perilous task. You can mark their territories and layers on your map with adding an element of danger. You can use different symbols or colors to indicate areas that are particularly hazardous. In this Undercity, a vampire, Olivier, has made a corner of the Undercity his own. He controls everything that moves through it and across the river, and thus has considerable power over the city above, though they do not know it. The creatures beneath the city are often less intelligent than those above, but not necessarily. Undercities can often also intersect with ancient crypts, where the dead are not always at rest. These crypts can be sprawling complexes filled with traps and undead guardians. You can highlight these areas on your maps to set the stage for thrilling encounters. Consider adding details like more hidden passages or cursed artifacts or symbols of old religions to enhance the atmosphere and give some world building and lore dumps. Use symbols like crosses and tombstones and bones. Add descriptions of eerie features like flickering torches or ancient runes to enhance the atmosphere. Have traps like collapsing floors Poison darts and hidden pits, all of these are common, and you can represent those with specific symbols and annotations on your maps. And of course, lastly, sewers are a common feature of an Undercity, and they're often home to all manner of swamp creatures. These areas can be mapped with the intricate details that show the flow of water and waste, although generally speaking, all you need to know is which way is downhill. Depicting the slimy, treacherous paths through the sewers can add a gritty realism. You can mark where the dangerous creatures lurk, show how they interact with the environment, for example near sources of waste or in dark, flooded chambers. Use wavy lines to show the water flow in different shades to indicate depth or filth. You can mark key locations like drainage points and access hatches. You can encounter all sorts of mundane and magical creatures in the sewers of a city. Rats, alligators, oozes, even mutated creatures can make sewers their homes. Depict their lairs and hunting grounds with distinctive symbols. Before we move on from planning out your Undercities, I want to talk a little more about the concepts involved when you explore the chambers and the tunnels beneath the cities. It's easy to add some ideas to your plan, such as sewer tunnels or thieves' hideouts, but allow yourself to come at the problem from a different angle, to think a little more deeply about it. Sewers are an excellent addition to any Undercity, and you should definitely use them. But there are other options too, old buildings that have been buried by the passage of time and forgotten. Maybe some of the old chambers have been rediscovered in the modern day by some criminal enterprise or perhaps an archaeologist. Maybe there are extensive crypts beneath the palace or the richer suburbs, trapped to defend against grave robbers. And there are other questions too. How do you deal with flooding? Does the tide impact on the sewer system in a coastal town? What used to live in the area and has been displaced to the forgotten corners of the Undercity? The Undercity often includes elaborate drainage systems. Mapping these can be a complex but, in the long term, rewarding task. If you show how the water flows, where it pools and how it drains away, it can help players to understand the layout and navigate the tunnels. Drainage systems can also provide clues to hidden areas or forgotten passages. They add depth to the map. Using arrows to indicate water flow direction, different shades of blue to show water depth, highlight areas where the water pools and drains away. You can also use symbols to show sluices or floodgates, secret doors or passages that are accessible through the drainage system. Use dotted lines or hidden symbols to indicate secret routes. The more accurately you map things, the more details you add, the more accurately your players can plan things. As cities grow and evolve, old buildings are often buried beneath new construction. These forgotten foundations can become parts of the Undercity, and mapping these buried structures can reveal the history of the city above, highlighting remnants of old architecture like crumbling walls and ancient doorways can add a sense of age and mystery. These areas might also be home to relics or secrets from the past. Use faded lines or shaded areas to depict old structures. Annotate them with notes about their original purpose and their current state. You can find all sorts of old buildings in the Undercity, such as old temples, forts, houses, and markets. Each can offer unique challenges and stories for adventurers. The Undercity is also a place where the dead are often laid to rest, intentionally or otherwise. Mapping out cemeteries or catacombs or tombs can add an eerier aspect. These domains of the dead are often filled with traps and the restless spirits of those interred. Adding symbols for burial sites and detailing their layouts can create a hauntingly beautiful map. So, for those you can use symbols like skulls and bones and crosses. Darker shades can indicate depth and danger. Annotations to describe notable features. Consider using traps left to deter grave robbers to make these areas a little more exciting. They can include hidden pits or swinging blades or collapsing ceilings. You can use specific symbols for each one so that you have more detail. Another thing to think is that flooding is a common hazard in any Undercity. Mapping out areas that are prone to flooding can help to navigate treacherous regions or give you something to think about as you plan. Use different shades of color or wave patterns to indicate water levels. Show how the flooding affects different areas and the pathways that it creates or obstructs. It can add a dynamic element to your map, as they need to contend with rising waters when they plan for heists or journeys through the Undercity. Now we come to the discussion of the flora and fauna found in the Undercity. Now this will obviously vary hugely depending on your world, and the setting and the climate and the history and all of that, but I've made 6 examples of things that you can find in this Undercity. It's also worth noting that I've added pomegranate trees to the list of flora and fauna. Now that's not a homebrew tree, but it has a notable addition. In my stories, as a nod to Greek mythology, there are specific varieties of pomegranate trees that grow in the Underdark. Because they don't require light to thrive, they subsist instead on ambient magic, and they can be found in this Undercity. The other creatures I've all made specifically for this map. They're nods to other creatures in myths and legends, or just to the environment itself. I've added in some details that will help an explorer to plan for them, and for a dungeon master to create obstacles or puzzles out of them. For instance, the Silogare fungus is a bright red, luminescent fungus that thrives in the damp, dark environments of the Undercity. Like some reptiles or fish, they'll grow to suit their container, remaining as small as 3 inches tall or up to 20 feet in height. They're used for light, and they can give a puff of hallucinogenic spores if disturbed. It's also sometimes called willowkin because it will relieve pain if chewed. Many urban alchemists use it in their brews and will wander down to the sewage tunnels to gather it, but it's considered unclean by the superstitious, so that fact is not widely publicized. The collier newts are large amphibious creatures that inhabit the wettest parts of the Undercity. They lived in the wetlands that once spread across the strait, but were forced away when the city expanded. Now they can be found in the drainage areas or near underground water sources. In particular, they provide an obstacle for the workers at the bathhouses of the city because the warm waters of the baths are perfect for the newt's eggs. They will fiercely defend their eggs too, so clearing the newts out of the tunnels annually is a fairly risky job for someone unskilled at defending themselves. The Rat King is a mythical creature said to rule over the countless rats of the Undercity. Mapping its domain can create a sense of foreboding and danger. It exists in myths and legends outside of this, but I have a specific take on it that you can use in your own stories. In my case, the Rat King is a rodent with an unusual gift. It has an inherited memory, specifically the inherited memory of every Rat King that came before it. It lines its tail with the skulls of the generations of rats. Rat Kings with lines 100 years long will be extremely cunning and have extraordinary intelligence, but this Rat King is of roughly human intelligence and has all the same flaws. It's lazy and greedy and gluttonous, but it is a wellspring of information and can be dealt with. Sludges are amorphous creatures that dwell in the muck and the mire of the Undercity. With bright yellow arms and red swirling shells, their bright colours act as a deterrent against predators, and they warn about their venom. And they are extremely venomous. Everything about them is worth avoiding, from their paralytic slime trails to the venomous barbs that the males can shoot from their cones to the poisonous flesh. They ooze toxins from every squishy pore. Otherwise, they pose absolutely no threat and are not aggressive. They simply pose an obstacle, or occasionally a slow death for a trapped enemy. The Chocoli are also called the Crypt Keeper's Bane because they feed on bone matter, and while they appear to be something akin to a hermit crab that has found a humanoid skull to call home, their shell is actually grown. How they adapted is a mystery, but they are perfectly suited to hide in crypts and graves, where they burrow through the corpses and dirt to find new bones to crunch. They're not generally aggressive, and they're not interested in eating flesh. However, if gathered in large enough numbers, and if hungry enough, then the Chocoli will use their extremely strong claws to try to peel the flesh off living things and get at the bones beneath. Thank you for following along with the Red Quill's Guide to Fantasy Lands. I hope that this series has inspired you and equipped you with new ideas for your own fantasy maps and stories. If you've enjoyed exploring the depths of the Undercity, don't forget to check out our previous episodes for insights into other iconic fantasy settings, from the lands of the Halflings to the realms of the Fae. Stay tuned for more exciting content, including our next video, which will be a celebration of our first 6 months of content creation. We are always updating and revamping how we create videos to make them easier to consume and more specific to your requirements. So for a broader exploration of the worlds that we've crafted, tune into the Lore Archive series, where we delve into the rich history and the vibrant cultures that make these settings come alive. Take a look at our next series, in which we'll be going back to the basics of how to create fantasy maps and some of the principles that I've used in these videos, which we'll revisit in more specific depth. Happy adventuring, and keep those quills sharp.